Camelot is a castle and court associated with the legendary King Arthur. Absent in the early Arthurian material, Camelot first appeared in 12th century French romances and, after the Lancelot-Grail cycle, eventually came to be described as the fantastic capital of Arthur's realm and a symbol of the Arthurian world. The story is located somewhere in Great Britain and sometimes associated with real cities, though more usually its precise location is not revealed. Most scholars regard it as being entirely fictional, its geography being perfect for romance writers. Arthurian scholar Norris J. Lacey commented that Camelot, located nowhere in particular, can be anywhere. Nevertheless, arguments about the location of the real Camelot have occurred since the 15th century and continue to rage today in popular works and for tourism purposes. Early appearances. The castle is mentioned for the first time in Creation de Troyes' poem Lancelot, the Knight of the Cart, dating to the 1170s, though it does not appear in all the manuscripts. It is mentioned in passing, and is not described. Un jour d'une ascension, fou venas devers Carly and Liwa artis atenu au court mold riche Camelot, si riche comme jour estu. Upon a certain ascension day King Arthur had come from Caerleon and had held a very magnificent court at Camelot as was fitting on such a day. Nothing in Creation's poem suggests the level of importance Camelot would have in later romances. For Creation, Arthur's chief court was in Caerleon in Wales. This was the king's primary base in Geoffrey of Monmouth's Historia Regum Britannia and subsequent literature. Creation depicts Arthur, like a typical medieval monarch, holding court at a number of cities and castles. It is not until the 13th century French prose romances, including the Lancelot-Grail and the post-Vulgate cycle, that Camelot began to supersede Caerleon, and even then, many descriptive details applied to Camelot derive from Geoffrey's earlier grand depiction of the Welsh town. Most Arthurian romances of this period produced in English or Welsh did not follow this trend. Camelot was referred to infrequently, and usually in translations from French. One exception is Sir Gawain and the Green Knight, which locates Arthur's court at Camelot. However, in Britain, Arthur's court was generally located at Caerleon or at Carlisle, which is usually identified with the Cardinal of the French romances. However, in the late 15th century, Thomas Malory created the image of Camelot most familiar to English speakers today in his La Morte d'Arthur, a work based mostly on the French romances. He firmly identifies Camelot with Winchester, an identification that remained popular over the centuries, though it was rejected by Malory's own editor, William Caxton, who preferred a Welsh location. Etymology. The name's derivation is uncertain. It has numerous different spellings in medieval French Arthurian romance, including Camelot, Camelot, Chamelot, Camahalo, Camalo, the Camelot, Camahalo, the Camelot, Camelot, Cameralo, Camelot, Camahalo, the Camelot, 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 and Gamaliel. Renowned Arthurian scholar Ernst Brugger suggested that it was a corruption of the site of Arthur's final battle, the Battle of Camelot. In Welsh tradition, Roger Sherman Loomis believed it was derived from Cavalon, a place name that he suggested was a corruption of Avalon. He further suggested that Camelot became Arthur's capital due to confusion with Arthur's other traditional court at Caerleon. Others have suggested a derivation from the British Iron Age and Romano-British place name Camulodunum, one of the first capitals of Roman Britain and which would have significance in Romano-British culture. Indeed, John Morris, the English historian who specialized in the study of the institutions of the Roman Empire and the history of sub-Roman Britain, suggested in his book The Age of Arthur that as the descendants of Romanized Britons looked back to a golden age of peace and prosperity under Rome, the name Camelot of Arthurian legend may have referred to the capital of Britannia in Roman times. It is unclear, however, where Creation would have encountered the name Camelodunum, or why he would render it as Camelot, though Urban T. Holmes argued in 1929 that Chrétien had access to Book 2 of Pliny's Natural History, where it is rendered as Camelodunno. Given Creation's known tendency to create new stories and characters, being the first to mention the hero Lancelot's love affair with Queen Guinevere for example, the name might also be entirely invented. Description in the romances, the Lancelot-Grail cycle and the texts it influenced depict the city of Camelot as standing along a river, downstream from Astolat. It is surrounded by plains and forests, and its magnificent cathedral, St. Stephen's, is the religious centre for Arthur's Knights of the Round Table. There are Arthur and Guinevere married, and there are the tombs of many kings and knights. In a mighty castle stands the Round Table. It is here that Galahad conquers the Siege Perilous, and where the knights see a vision of the Holy Grail and swear to find it. Jousts are held in a meadow outside the city. In the Palamedes and other works, the castle is eventually destroyed by King Mark of Cornwall after the loss of Arthur at the Battle of Camelot. However maddening to later scholars searching for Camelot's location, its imprecise geography serves the romances well, as Camelot becomes less a literal place than a powerful symbol of Arthur's court and universe. It should be noted, too, that there is a Camelot featured as the home of Perceval's mother in the romance Pearl's Vows. The romance's versions of Camelot drew on earlier descriptions of Arthur's fabulous court. From Geoffrey's grand description of Caerleon, Camelot gains its impressive architecture, its many churches and the chivalry and courtesy of its inhabitants. Geoffrey's description in turn drew on an already established tradition in Welsh oral tradition of the grandeur of Arthur's court. The tale Culhwch Olwen, associated with the Mabinogion and perhaps written in the 11th century, draws a dramatic picture of Arthur's hall and his many powerful warriors who go from there on great adventures, placing it in Seliwig, an uncertain locale in Cornwall, although the court at Seliwig is the most prominent in remaining early Welsh manuscripts. The various versions of the Welsh triads agree in giving Arthur multiple courts, one in each of the areas inhabited by the Celtic Britons, Cornwall, Wales and the Hen Ogledd. This perhaps reflects the influence of widespread oral traditions common by 800 which are recorded in various place names and features such as Arthur's Seat, indicating Arthur was a hero known and associated with many locations across Brittonic areas of Britain as well as Brittany. Even at this stage Arthur could not be tied to one location. Many other places are listed as a location where Arthur holds court in the later romances, Carlisle and London perhaps being the most prominent identifications. The romances' versions of Camelot draw on earlier traditions of Arthur's fabulous court. The Seliwig of Culhwch Olwen appears in the Welsh triads as well. This early Welsh material places Wales's greatest leader outside its national boundaries. Geoffrey's description of Caerleon is probably based on his personal familiarity with the town and its impressive Roman ruins. It is less clear that Caerleon was associated with Arthur before Geoffrey. Several French romances have Arthur hold court at Cardiel in Wales, a northern city based on the real Carlisle. Malory's identification of Camelot as Winchester was probably partially inspired by the latter city's history. It had been the capital of Wessex under Alfred the Great, and boasted the Winchester Round Table, an artifact constructed in the 13th century but but widely believed to be the original by Malory's time. Malory's editor Caxton rejects the association, saying Camelot was in Wales and that its ruins could still be seen. This is a likely reference to the Roman ruins at Caerwent. Malory associated other Arthurian locations with modern places, for instance locating Astolat at Guildford. In 1542, John Leland reported the locals around Cadbury Castle, formerly known as Camelot in Somerset, considered it to be the original Camelot. This theory, which was repeated by later antiquaries, is bolstered, or may have derived from, Cadbury's proximity to the River Cam and the villages of Queen Camel and West Camel, and remained popular enough to help inspire a large-scale archaeological dig in the 20th century. These excavations, led by archaeologist Leslie Alcock from 1966 to 70, were titled Cadbury Camelot, and won much media attention, even being mentioned in the film of the musical Camelot. The dig revealed that the site seems to have been occupied as early as the 4th millennium BC and to have been refortified and occupied by a major Brittonic ruler and his warband from c. 470. This early medieval settlement continued until around 580. The works were by far the largest known fortification of the period, double the size of comparative cares and with Mediterranean artifacts representing extensive trade and Saxon ones showing possible conquest. The use of the name Camelot and the support of Geoffrey Ashe helped ensure much publicity for the finds, but Alcock himself later grew embarrassed by the supposed Arthurian connection to the site. Following the arguments of David Dumville, Alcock felt the site was too late and too uncertain to be a tenable Camelot. Modern archaeologists follow him in rejecting the name, calling it instead Cadbury Castle Hill Fort. Despite this, Cadbury remains widely associated with Camelot. There were two towns in Roman Britain named Camelot-Dunham, Colchester in Essex and Outlain in West Yorkshire, derived from the Celtic god Camelus, and this has led to the suggestion that they originated the name. However, the Essex Camelot-Dunham was located well within territory usually thought to have been conquered early in the 5th century by Saxons, so it is unlikely to have been the location of any true Camelot. The town was definitely known as Colchester as early as the Anglo-Saxon Chronicle in 917. Even Colchester Museum argues strongly regarding the historical Arthur. It would be impossible and inconceivable to link him to the Colchester area, or to Essex more generally, pointing out that the connection between the name Camelot-Dunham and Colchester was unknown until the 18th century. Other places in Britain with names related to camel have also been suggested, such as Camelford in Cornwall, located down the River Camel from where Geoffrey places Camlan, the scene of Arthur's final battle. The area's connections with Camelot and Camlan are merely speculative. Later uses, Camelot has become a permanent fixture in interpretations of the Arthurian legend. The symbolism of Camelot so impressed Alfred, Lord Tennyson, that he wrote up a prose sketch on the castle as one of his earliest attempts to treat the Arthurian legend. A Connecticut Yankee in King Arthur's Court, a novel by Mark Twain in 1889, takes place in Camelot. Recent versions typically retain Camelot's lack of precise location and its status as a symbol of the Arthurian world, though they typically transformed the castle itself into romantically lavish visions of a High Middle Ages palace. It lends its name to the 1960 musical Camelot by Alan J. Lerner and Frederick Lowe, which is based on T.H. White's literary version of the legend, The Once and Future King. The musical was adapted into a 1967 film of the same name, which starred Richard Harris as Arthur, and which featured the castle castle of Coca. Segovia is a fittingly opulent Camelot. Some writers of the realist strain of modern Arthurian fiction have attempted a more sensible Camelot, inspired by Alcock's Cadbury Camelot. Excavation. Writers Marion Zimmer Bradley, Mary Stewart, and Catherine Christian place the Camelots in that place and describe it accordingly. Camelot makes only a brief appearance in the 1975 parody Monty Python and the Holy Grail. Having recruited several knights, King Arthur invites them to reside with him at Camelot. The camera pans to a castle on a hill, then cuts to the knights as each in succession joyfully exclaims, "Camelot." Then, after an interior sequence, in which the resident knights sing, were Knights of the Round Table, while engaging in madcap antics, the camera cuts back to Arthur, who decides, on second thought, let's not go there. It is a silly place. In American contexts, the word Camelot is sometimes used to refer admiringly to the presidency of John F. Kennedy. The Lerner and Loewe musical was still quite recent at the time, and his widow Jackie quoted its lines in a 1963 Life interview following JFK's assassination. She said the lines, "Don't let it be forgot that once there was a spot for one brief shining moment that was known as Camelot," were Kennedy's favorite in the score, adding that, "There'll be great presidents again, but there'll never be another Camelot again. It will never be that way again." Camelot Theme Park was a resort and theme park located in the English county of Lancashire, UK. Camelot is a French television series that presents a humorous alternative version of the Arthurian legend. Camelot is featured in Once Upon a Time. In Heroes and Villains, Rumpelstiltskin once visited Camelot to obtain a magic gauntlet. In The Dark Swan, Camelot is fully seen. Brocéliande is somewhere near Camelot. According to an interview with Adam Horowitz, Camelot is a few days' ride away from the Enchanted Forest and Arundel.